Right, thank you so much for staying with us. Time now for To The Point. And on our episode this Sunday, we are breaking down radicalization, okay? So let's take a look at what radicalization means. So according to the Oxford Dictionary, it is the action or process of causing someone to adopt extreme positions on political or social issues. Now, one may wonder, is radicalization similar or leads to one joining a cult like what we saw in Shakahola? So according to the same dictionary, Oxford, a cult is a system of religious veneration and devotion directed towards a particular figure or object. So up next, what are some of the push factors to militant groups? Well, according to the Combating Terrorism Center, top on the list is unemployment. Listen to this. 5 of the 15 youth they spoke to said that joining violent extremism was a form of employment, which actually paid well, from $50 to $150 per month. Now, the next reason is fear of victimization, where those interviewed said they were worried about being seen as weak by family and society, and thus had to man up and join. There's also revenge, whose urge was due to harassment, particularly of female relatives at checkpoints. And lastly, lack of education, where only 2 participants mentioned this. When asked to clarify, they stated that this entailed a lack of education in general, okay, and not religious education. Of course, that is from Combating Terrorism Center. Let's take a look at the next slide, which is why people join cults, and they do it for various reasons, okay, most of which revolve around a desire for meaning and community. Some come from troubled backgrounds, as well as having difficulty fitting into society. Let's take a look at our next slide, which is the world's most chilling religious radicalizations. The top on the list is Guyana jungle apocalypse, which recorded. This is the Guyana jungle apocalypse, which was the most chilling one. It happened in 1978, and this is one of the most dramatic mass murder suicides of modern history. 914 adults and children from a U.S. cult died in the jungle of the small South American country of Guyana on November 18. U.S. preacher Jim Jones is said to have coerced members of his People's Temple sect into committing revolutionary suicide, urging parents to give their children poison, while others were shot trying to flee and forced to drink the deadly liquid. Now, up next is Closer Home, which is in Uganda. This is the movement of restoration for 10 commandments that happened in 2000, where some 700 members from the movement for restoration of the 10 commandments of God burned to death. Members of the cult, which believed the world would come to an end at the turn of the millennium, had locked themselves inside a church with the doors and windows nailed shut from the outside. The building was then set alight. Now, third on the list is the Waco siege. This happened in 1993. 76 members of a sect in Waco, Texas, including 20 children, died in a blaze at their wooden fortress when it was stormed by federal agents after a 51-day siege. And lastly, which we all know, is the Shakahola horror, where members were coerced to starve themselves to death. So far, over 420 people have been confirmed dead, to an extent of the Malindi Sub-County Funeral Home morgue filling up and needing extra morgues. Let's take a look at our last slide for tonight, which is terror attacks in Kenya. Now, first up is the Westgate attack. This happened in 2013, and 67 people died. In 2014, we had the Mpeketoni attack, where we lost 60 people. In 2015, the Garissa University attack, where we lost 148 people. Remember, 148 is not just a number. And lastly, in 2019, the Dusit attack, where we had 21 people lose their lives. And that's all from To The Point tonight. My colleague Violet Auma from Kakamega filed a piece on this year that will lead us to our conversation with my guest already with me. But before we have that conversation, let's take a look at that piece from Violet Auma.
I'm in Emayala village, Mumias East Sub-County in Kakamega County, in a home of one of the aggrieved parents. For him, 4 of his children left his home to Shakahola, that is to be with the controversial preacher Paul Mackenzie. I am with Omar Benson Mutimba, the father to the 4 kids. Benson, umesema kwamba watoto wako waliondoka hapa wakaenda Shakahola. Ilikuwaje watoto ndo wakafika pale Shakahola?
Huyu kijana mkubwa Felix Nteta, firstborn, alikuwa anasoma kwa shule ya Kibabii University. Akati alikuwa kule, alikutana na wenzake huko wenye walikuwa wanatoka Mombasa kwa dhehebu ya Paul Mackenzie. Walikuwa kama maagenti wa kutafuta wafuasi wenye wanaenda kushiriki na Mackenzie. So walimconfuse kwa mambo ya masomo ni ya shetani, kazi ni ya shetani. Na vile mtoto alipelekwa Mombasa huko, ndio mtoto alifanywa mambo ya ushirikina huko, ndio mtoto akajikuta tayari ameshakubaliana na hiyo maandiko ya Mackenzie.
Ikakuwaje hawa watoto wako wengine wakajiunga naye?
So baadaye vile mtoto alienda huko, vile alirudi, alienda Mombasa mara pili kama mzazi sijui. So ndio baadaye mtoto alikuja akangoja mimi nimeenda kazi, mama naye anajiandaa pia kutoka, ndio akaiba wengine kama wanaenda shule, wakapanda gari wakaenda naye mpaka kwa Mackenzie. Wakati walienda vile nipeana report kwa serikali, wakaanza kufuatilia kupitia internal security Matiang'i pamoja na Makoha na wengine walinisaidia mbio sana. Mwezi mmoja watoto walikuwa wamerudi. Na wakati walirudi walikuwa kama bubu wajielewi, wanachukunia tu penye wako, wanachikojelea penye wako, damu umechonjwa mwili wamechanja na kisu, damu inatirikanga tu, hata wakikalia nguo yes toka. November tarehe last year, November tarehe 18 hapo, huyu mtoto anaitwa Ian Marema akaniambia, dadi, ndugu yangu alikuwa amekuja tena, pastor amemtuma akuje atuchukue ile maangano tulikuwa tumefanya na yeye, wakati wake imefika twende tukamilishe. Then baadaye ndio huyu alikuja tena February hii mwaka tu tarehe 4, akachukua wa class 8 wa Mbaga Primary School Siaya, wakaenda na yeye. Mtoto akakuja akanaswa sauti yake, akanaswa akili yake, akanaswa tumba eskula chakula. Hasa mtoto wako tu kama bubu na ongei. Nikaenda hata hospitali, niatembea kila hospitali, mtoto sio mgonjwa, mtoto ni mzima tu. Nikaita hata pastor wangu tukaombea, hata tukakuwa na watu wa guiding and counseling, nikafahamisha wazazi. Mtoto wako tu ni kitu tu wako tu kama bubu ako hapo namna hiyo. Mpaka dakika mwisho fulani alifika mahali tunajiandaa kwenda kushika Mackenzie kesho asubuhi na polisi wa Siaya. Tumepaka twende tufike Malini, twende tushike Mackenzie, na mtoto naye anasidiwa jioni kumpeleka hospitali na nakata roho.
Him is actually optimistic, hoping that one day, one time, he will be able to meet his children. I take it back to you, Grace Korea.
Right, thank you so much, Violet, for that piece there. And it's now time for our discussion tonight on To The Point. Like I said, we are breaking down religious radicalization, and my guests are already with me in studio, Reverend Dr. Edward Burry. He is the Parish Minister, PCE Embakasi. Thank you so much for joining us. And to my extreme left is Sheikh Abu Najmer, the Muslim chaplain at the Kenyatta National Hospital. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, so gentlemen, I want us to start by reacting to the 2 pieces we just watched. That piece there by Violet, and later on To The Point explainer that we just had. And on Violet's piece, we have a father whose all 4 children were at Shakahola. He lost 2 courtesy of that. He explains, you know, how his sons were like before losing them, yeah? And it is sad, especially coming from a parent. And the question that we're asking our viewers today is just how is it possible for members to be bound by belief? And I want to start by that. To an extent of forsaking education, forsaking all the morals and education that you have had, and just deciding to, forsaking family, and deciding to go to God knows where. Rev, if I could start with you.
Yeah, it just goes to show how critical matters of faith are. And matters of spirituality are, because sometimes we take faith and religion as if they are what you can say like things you will to do, like they are choices you can make. You choose to be spiritual, and if you are spiritual, it's fine. If you're not, it's fine. But from this story and also the other details that you gave earlier, it shows that faith is way deeper in the mind and in the spirit. of the human being.
Right.
So we should take matters faith, matters spirituality very seriously. You know, as much as we are a secular country, and there are people who would say, oh, we are a secular country, but the secular space has its own, what you can say, it has its own dynamics of extreme secularism, so to speak. But also, we are more spiritual than we are secular. And so we can see now also that spirituality is really an intense thing. It captures people to the extent that they live lives that sometimes don't make sense. You are captured.
Right.
Just shows that the spiritual aspect or the dimension of spirituality of a human being is very deep. Now, let me just put it out here, just to show how deep it is, and allow me to use both the Christians and also the Muslims.
Right.
We believe we'll go to heaven. You know, how deep is that? That's deep, because it's telling us that there's another world. You know, there is another world, and we absolutely believe that, you know? And that tells you that this is deep. This is actually a deep thing, and we should take it very intensely, especially giving the right doctrine.
Right.
So it is important that we draw attention to false doctrine, and as much as possible, and rid our society from false teachings and false teachers, because that's where it begins. It doesn't begin with teachings, it begins with the teachers. And so that is, even as the government right now is taking a lot of interest in matters religion, of course it's in a reactive way.
Right.
But I think this should not be a moment, it should be a continuous monitoring of that space.
Okay.
Because we can already see what's going on.
Right, and we'll talk about that, what the government is doing. And I like what you said, is it a reaction, you know? Sheikh, I want to rope you in, because I want us to talk about what we saw on To The Point. So many statistics that both fall on the Christian side and the Muslim side, yeah? We had 914 people lose their lives in Guyana. They were forced to commit revolutionary suicide, yeah? We've seen terror attacks in the country. We lost 148 people at the Garissa University attack. That's just one of the many that we've seen. Why is this?
First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me here. TV47, it's the first time I'm here. And I really love your studio, it's very beautiful.
State-of-the-art studios, Sheikh.
Yes, now coming back to answer your question, you know, the factors which lead to radicalization, you say, it was mentioned like 3, and one of them being lack of knowledge. So I think as Muslims, as Christians, you know, we need to go back to the Quran, you know, go back to the Bible. You know, as the father or the reverend, as they preach, you know, you should ensure that what they are preaching at least can refer back to the text.
Right.
You know, and this is a problem that whereby, you know, even us at the mosque, you know, a sheikh tells you, you know, do this, do that, you know, and nobody, you know, we just carry the holy books. And that is why you always say that the problem is not the text, but the reader. You know, even as we read, do we seek further clarification from those who are more learned than us?
But is it also not the teacher?
It could be the teacher, yes. Like in the case of Mackenzie, you know, he told these people, you know, you shouldn't eat and stay hungry. But it is said that the guy used to eat. And he was healthy, you know, he looked okay. Because there's no way he would have gained the strength of preaching if he wasn't eating and if he wasn't drinking. So the same way, you know, when we come to Prophet Muhammad, you know, Jesus, they preached, you know, they were examples, role models. Whatever they say, they implemented it. They put it into action. Now, these people would have been wise enough to, you know, like, where would now be, but where is your action?
Yeah.
And people would start, you know, like investigating. And after that, you know, like in Islam, what we do, the Quran says, "Lima taquluna ma la taf'alun." Why are you saying what you are not practicing? So as a Muslim, as a sheikh, as a preacher, if you tell people fast, you should fast. If you tell people abstain from fornication and adultery, you should be an example. If you tell people give for the sake of God, you should be an example. So I think it applies in both religions. And I think that's where things started going wrong when we preach, you know, preach water and drink wine. You know,
Yeah, yeah. And you're talking about teachings, and I want us to dwell there.
Yes.
Because, Sheikh, I wanted to come from you on national television. Just what do the Islamic teachings say about jihad?
Yes, Islamic teachings, especially the Quran, has a lot, it is spoken about the jihad. But what is jihad? Jihad means making effort, struggle. So you wake up in the morning, you come to work, and you're a news anchor. You're doing jihad. Yeah, that's jihad. You're struggling, to put food on the table. In the right way, you're not robbing anyone. You're doing things in the right way. A teacher wakes up in the morning, go to school, that's jihad. But the saddest thing is that the radicals, they only take one kind of jihad.
Yes.
The military, using force and bombing and killing. You see, and this kind of jihad, it is there, yes, in the Quran, but it has rules and regulations.
Which are?
For example, number one, a country like Saudi Arabia, let me give you an example. It's a country that has a leader, they have a military, they have diplomats, it is a set country. So they can perform jihad, which means that if they get attacked by another country, they can fight as a country. You see, but it is not allowed like any Muslim, 1, 2, 3, I decide like, oh, today I've been wronged. So I take a bomb and I take a gun and go in revenge. Every country, according to the Islamic law, has to, we follow the law, we follow the Amir, we follow the orders which are laid down in that country that you live in.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Rev, you talked about the government and what it is doing. And 2 days ago, we saw it deregister a few churches, New Life Press Center, Good News International Ministries, Helicopter of Christ Church, Theophila's Church, and a few more. And today, George Marenga ran a story for us over, was it New Life? Yes, New Life, which the congregants were thronging in today. Services went on as usual. Especially as a church, as a religion, Christianity, is this open defiance?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the closing down of particular churches. This is it's an emotive subject because on many angles, sometimes you would, there's a legal angle to it. There's also a religious angle because churches are supposed to be self-regulating.
Yes.
Supposed to be like a peer situation whereby churches look at each other. And now the government also has a duty to make sure that its citizens are safe, at whatever point. So the government itself, it maybe looks like it is overstepping itself, but with the failures sometimes that happen in the religious sector, just like any other sector,
right,
the government rightfully would come to that space, which is sorry. It's a sorry state because you'd expect that we as churches would be able to do a peer thing and make sure that we catch things before things fall apart. But clearly, we're not. Right, so because of that lapse, now the government comes in, and it's so difficult to fight back because the government does have a duty to protect its people. Now that said, then the closing of churches, and then seeing now people going still to those churches after deregistration. On one hand, it's a defiance. But on the other hand, it's also that they can't believe it, It's a sense of, can a church be closed? It's unbelievable. And we saw one of the persons say, honestly, this is our hope. This is where we find relief. Yeah. This is where, how can it be closed down? Whether it's curiosity or just defiance, it's difficult for people to just not show up on a Sunday. Morning. They really want to see what's going on. So on one part, you can call it defiance. On the other hand, it's a curiosity, but also kind of a disbelief. But now you see also the leaders would also guide their followers and tell them that we're closed. But if the leaders themselves are rejecting that closure, then and they are now going to court saying that, this is illegal, right? Then you don't expect that there will be affluent closure. Right. Closure of doors, people are not showing up because there's a certain transition period. And I think what we are seeing, I think we can call it more transition period than defiance.
Yeah. Okay, and I want to ask you a question that we saw on Marenga's piece. I forget who said it, but he asked, why did we have Shakahola? Might be an unfair question because you are not, Pastor Mackenzie, but why did we have Shakahola? Not just that, but we've had so many exposés that have been done by the media, top of my mind, the likes of Pastor Kanyari, and just, is it not incumbent upon leaders like you, Reverend, to just preach what's right, tell us what's right, because we're seeing members just follow blindly. Someone will tell you to deny yourself food and you will do it without questioning.
I totally agree that leaders have a huge responsibility. And this is not just from analysis, it's from scriptures, that teachers have a high responsibility, especially not to mislead the flock. Now, misleading the flock biblically is a huge spiritual, or we can call it a spiritual crime, right? So it is the duty of the teachers, the preachers, to make sure that they follow sound doctrine. Now, that is a diverse subject because there could be two types of teachings, which sometimes, in terms of extremist teachings, there could be one that is tactical, that the teachers actually know that what they are teaching is false, right? And so there's a certain level of manipulation and deception that is intentional. For instance, what the Sheikh has said, that you tell everyone not to eat, but there's a menu for every day for you, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, to make sure that you're well balanced out. Now, sometimes there are levels, some particular levels of the movement know what's going on, know the deception, because it's kind of a plan, right? But also now there's another dimension of extremist teachings where the leaders actually believe it. They're not manipulating. They have gone on a tangent, right, but they actually believe it. Take, for instance, one of the ones you talked about, the worst, whereby the cult leader dies with the followers. Yes. Now that's a different kind of view in terms of extremist teachings. But to come back to your point is that the teacher is very responsible. And if people are going wrong, then the person to hold account is the teacher. The teacher. Right. And of course, now the question becomes now how does the teacher now gain the right doctrine? And I think that's a question that, again, has its own practical point.
And that is actually my question to Sheikh here, because on the back of what we just spoke about, on especially the jihad and the teachings around it, just how do we ensure, especially our children, we take them to the right madrasas, the right teachers, so that they grow up knowing the truth, knowing what it is that you're telling us here?
That's very important. I think the Reverend will remind me, is it Paul who said that people perish because of lack of knowledge? Yes. And also in Islam...
Not Paul, but...
It's who?
But it's in scriptures.
Yes.
But it's not Paul.
It's not. It's okay.
But it's there in the Bible.
Of course.
Yes, it is.
And in Islam also we say the first verse to be revealed to Prophet Muhammad was Zikra, which means reader, that we have to be, read. Within the Muslim community, when we get an imam or a sheikh, there are certain standards of knowledge. We say that now this is qualified to become a sheikh, to become an imam. You have to finish what we call ibtidai, which is primary, and then the thanawi, which is secondary, and then the jami'i, university. Now, interestingly, you'll find that some of the people or some of the sheikhs who've been accused of radicalizations, or they've lacked some of these papers. They've lacked some of this paper. It is also some of these papers they don't have. Secondly, it is upon the Muslim community, you know, to go to scholars. And praise be to God that nowadays we have, you know, like you go to Jamia Mosque and South Sea and other masajid, you know, other mosques. All the sheikhs, they know that, you know, this went to university, you know, this is okay, this is a scholar, this is not. All the Muslims, you know, they know. This is just a preacher but not learned. You know, this is not a graduate.
Right.
This one did not complete, you know, Thanawi or high school or Ibtidai. So this is well known among the Muslim community. And that is why you'll never get any scholar in Kenya, you know, any Muslim imam or sheikh who has become, who is radical and is learned. We don't have. We don't have. You know, all the sheikhs, you know, they are learned, they are scholars, they graduated from Medina University, from Cairo, from Sudan. None of them has been accused of radicalization. Yes,
right. And on the back of that, take us through some of the examples of Islamic teachings that emphasize on tolerance, emphasize on coexistence, and respect for other faiths.
I really like this question. There is a very powerful verse in the Quran. I'll quote it in Arabic and then translate.
All right.
It says, وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعَلَكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا. If the Almighty God has so wished, He would have made you one nation, one religion, and one people. But that was not the wish of God. In another verse, He says, لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينٌ. That you have your religion and we have our religion. Deen is religion, which means that the Quran also recognizes other beliefs and people who have a different faith from ours. And I always like to give these examples whenever I go to high schools and national schools, you know, to reach out to the Muslim students. I always tell them, Moses was here, you know, Musa, Moses, and the whole world did not become Jews. Then Jesus came, the whole world did not become Christian. And then our Prophet Muhammad came. Not everybody accepted the message of Islam. What does that teach us? Tolerance. We cannot, you see, that's where now the radicalization begins. That I want the whole world to become Muslim. We want the whole Kenya to become Christian. No, Kenya is a Christian nation. You see, we are all, you know, we should, this is a problem. This is a problem. We forget that, you know, even before independence, you know, Mombasa was there, and people were Muslims. Nordistan was there, and people were Muslims. And these other parts of the country, you know, people still, you know, we were Muslims, we were Christians, you know, we had different beliefs, and that should be respected. And that should be, you know, our religion should be a point of uniting us rather than separating us. Right. If you study the Quran, it talks very beautifully about Jesus, that He was born through miracle. You know, the Virgin Mary, the mother, was very pious. You know, it calls us, you know, to be righteous to the non-Muslims. لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين. The Quran is commanding you to be good, you know, with those people who have not they have not fought you because you are Muslim. I always ask the Muslim, you know, community, the Christian community, you know, all our teachers were Christians, from physics to chemistry to biology to maths. Most of us, you know, you see a Muslim doctor, Muslim engineer, Muslim pilot, Muslim nurse. Most of your teachers were non-Muslims, the Christians. How much we as a community are willing now to give back to our fellow Christian community from whom we learned a lot, you know, from primary to university level.
Right.
You know, as a country, as Muslims, how much are we willing to give back to what we took from them and the services that we got from fellows of other religions. So I think we have a huge responsibility of being tolerant,
right,
accepting one another, and at the end of it all, let's agree on what we agree and not fight on what we disagree.
But Sheikh, again, on the back of that, because you're telling us what the Quran says, and that is basically what every Muslim should follow, yeah?
Yes, yes.
The same way Christians should follow what is written on the Bible, yeah?
Yes.
But on the ground, in some instances, the situation is different. And I say that being backed up by the statistics we had on some of the terror attacks we've had in Kenya alone, for instance. I won't ask why is that, but I choose to ask, what are you doing as a sheikh and generally as the Muslim religion? What are you doing regarding that? Because what you're telling us, which is on the Quran, and what we see on the ground is different.
Let me tell you, even during those days of Al-Shabaab and the attacks, you know, on the media, and as a Muslim community, we were very much afraid. I believe as a Muslim, you know, we did a lot to stop this. It wasn't there on the media. You know, yes, the government did their best, the anti-terror, the intelligence and what. But what the sheikhs and the ulama did, it wasn't documented. But we did a lot, like the 90% of the work. Let me give you an example. You see the radicals and the jihadists. You show them, you know, you kill them, you shoot them, you make them disappear. They win at the end of the day. How do you win this battle? You debate with them to the Quran. What you are doing is not in the Quran. What you are doing is not in the Hadith. No, this is not jihad. This is not the right way of doing it. You see, we have a country, we have, through debate, I know many scholars and many sheikhs who have not even been honored. They did a lot to fight this radicalization. Most of the Friday sermons, you know, Friday khutbas, in many schools we reached out to many students, the government schools and also the Muslim schools. We reached out and we were able to fight this thought. You know, and I believe that 90% of the work to fighting the radicals was done by the scholars and by the sheikhs and by the ulamas.
Right. Okay, Rev, because we're almost running out of time, let's talk about the role that, again, Christianity is taking in terms of shaping the society and shunning the extremism that we see from the Christianity side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one is that in the recent situation is mostly touching on the Christians. And I mean, 400 plus people dying. And so we have the Christian faith is really on the spotlight.
Yeah.
It's on the spot now because what are we going to do about this, right? Critically, many people, many of the teachers now, many of the pastors are now on edge. You know, they've come to a realization that that all is not well. So just the Shakahola moment has, you know, brought people to their senses, pastors to their senses. So it's already like has had a shocking effect. Even as I teach in the script, when I teach in church today, I'm a bit conscious about what I'm teaching.
Yeah.
Do I feel like I'm going off? You know, if I feel like I'm going off, you just know that, hey, you know, I mean, this is not the right thing. You know, so there's what we can call the shocking effect of Shakahola. That's one. Then the second thing is that there's a lot of conversations going on about the need for, of course, self-regulation in terms of the church. And that has its conditions, because for the state to allow the church to have self-regulation, it means there has to be systems, no longer amorphous or imagined conversations. Now the church has to come up with real structures of making sure that there are controls, and then those structures have to be structures that have a certain legal consequence, right? So that those conversations are actually going on, and even there are some initiatives actually that have been done by some thinkers in the church circles that are actually bringing some governance content, you know, that can be used across the board, even by both Christians and Muslims and people across the religious sector. But also very critical is the center of the Christian faith is actually the greatest commandment that Jesus Christ gave. The greatest commandment is love. And the moment we focus on that commandment, and then matters of extremism and matters of people like conflicting and violence and death actually are shielded totally the moment we focus on building a loving community, you know, a beloved community. That's going back to the basics, let me say, going back to the basics, and also now focusing on the apex, you know, community that is built on the great commandment that actually includes even, I mean, people who are not like you, you know? Jesus places a big challenge and says, if you only love your friend, then how different are you? You should also reach out to a person who is even of opposed views to you, and then be able to love them there. So the call now is to go back to the community that Jesus actually envisions, and that way we will definitely have a minimalization of this extremist tendency.
Right, Rev. But how about the congregation itself, the Christian faith, the flock? Because like what Sheikh was saying, read the Quran for yourself and know what it says so that someone else does not come and tell you it says otherwise, yeah? How about the Christian faith? Because you should be in a position to know that what this person is telling me, what this pastor, this reverend, this bishop is telling me is not in the Bible.
Now that also must be a teaching by itself. That it comes, how will you as a Christian know that this person is telling me the wrong thing, or this person, this teacher is interpreting the scriptures wrongly? There has to be then a systematic way of empowering the Christian on the right interpretation. Because we all read, it is the matter of interpretation and so an understanding, so you can be able to tell, oh, this is going off now, but you do that as a factor of teaching, right? So when it comes to now, and this is where we also rhyme with the Sheikh, that the teachers who are entrusted with the people must also be true teachers, well taught, well educated, not using subjective methods, like up in the air, but they have to teach the people how to read and interpret scriptures rightly and how to tell a false teaching. Right. Now, it's not new. Even in the scriptures, we find Paul having whole narratives of how to identify false teachers, and he even talks about particular names. And so naming false teachers as well, like the way the government is helping to name. Well, they could use the language of deregistration, but what they are really doing is naming, teachers which we should be really suspicious about. So it is our duty as teachers to make sure that we teach the people the right interpretation so that you're able to actually be a shield by yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'd like to get your closing remarks because we have about 2 minutes left. Sheikh, I want to start with you. We've talked solutions, and this is what I like because the whole point of to the point, the explainer we had is to paint the problem, and then we here give solutions, yeah? So as part of your closing remarks and anything else that you'd like to say, let's talk about how we can coexist, all of us, not just the two religions here, Christians and Muslims. We have Hindus too, we have Buddhists, we have even atheists, yeah? How can we all coexist and peacefully while at it?
I think how can we all coexist? I think the best is to just implement what's in the scripture. Because all scriptures, they talk about tolerance, respecting, loving your neighbor. You treat others as you want them to treat you. I think that's the basic rule in every religion. Not wronging anyone. And if you think you're on the right religion, then show it through your deeds and not through violence. Being kind, being polite, how you behave. Preach through your behavior. Yeah, preach through your behavior if you know that you're on the right path.
Right.
Again, we'll just use the scriptures. Because again, a big scripture around love is love your neighbor, as yourself. Now, who is your neighbor? The neighbor is everyone, really, So the relationship that we should extend to the Hindu, to the atheist, to the Muslim,
you laughed at that.
To everyone is a neighbor treatment. Give everyone neighbor treatment. And once you do that, then, and of course, neighborliness, being kind and improving the other person who is next to you. I think if we adopted that worldview when it comes to relating with others, that this is your neighbor. Love your neighbor. Improve your neighbor. Because once you improve your neighbor, then you improve the community. And all of us would want a peaceful community. And I think right there, in that, a neighbor understanding gives us a way of living every single day, even when you meet people who are not of your convictions.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great place to end it. Thank you so much for your time and contribution, Reverend Dr. Edward Burry, Parish Minister, Peace